Again, Barbara Walters.
A young Swedish woman from an aristocratic background pursued by then Senator John F. Kennedy. So far, we've heard about their chance meeting that set off the sparks, the letters, and the phone calls. What happens next, as Lynn Shure continues the story, seems right out of a romance novel.
Senator John F. Kennedy's pursuit of Gunilla von Post lasted 2 years, until August of 1955. She and her family were vacationing on Sweden's west coast, in a beach town called Bostad. That's where he traveled to see her, with his college chum, Torby McDonald, in tow. Gunilla arranged for them to stay here. Finally, they were together.
It was very remarkable how that reunion was. He just would say, "Oh, Gunilla," and it was like it had been yesterday. And he said, "Torby, take all the suitcases up," and then there we were, and it was beautiful.
How have you reconciled your feelings about him, though, knowing what he did was adultery, that he did this with you while he was essentially doing it to his wife?
Yeah, that is true, but I don't regret what I did. I hope I didn't hurt anybody. I don't think I did. It was very kept in secret. I don't want to hurt anybody.
Gunilla recalls a magical week.
He loved it. And, we had often lunch at the harbor. And then we went to Turkov, and he thought it was like Cape Cod.
Family and friends like Madeline Lindisfarne were at parties and dinners with the couple.
I remember he was very charming. He was in love with Gunilla. And Gunilla was very, very beautiful. Really very, very beautiful.
In my view, he was dating Gunilla, no doubt about it. And I saw them holding hands.
Dr. Bjorn Tengroot and Gunilla's cousin, Margareta von Post, have vivid memories of Kennedy.
He had this hair, in a mess, like a very young boy.
Like tousled hair.
Yes, and he like somebody who didn't like to comb his hair and who was doing things his own way.
Gunilla remembers their trip motoring through the south of Sweden as a carefree storybook week.
And Jack was holding on to me when I sat in the middle, and he sang, "I love Paris in the springtime. Dun, 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 dun." And I know that. He was a married man, and I tell you, it was not easy for me when I know he was leaving.
They ended the week as guests at the regal estate of Gunilla's friend, Gustav Hagemann.
I found him very quiet and nice and charming.
But Gunilla was already thinking of his imminent departure.
It was on a Saturday, the last evening he had in Sweden. I said, what do you mean? To leave me again like this? And he said, "You see, I will arrange everything. I have to talk to my father. I love you, Gunilla, I love you." And he said, "I am going to talk to my father soon, and I want a divorce."
As you understand it, did he talk to his father?
Yes, I know that. He said, "I want a divorce, I wanted to marry Gunilla von Post." And the father said, "Are you out of your mind?" And then he called me and my mother, and the whole family was informed that he couldn't marry me.
I do think Gunilla's memories of how JFK was beholden to his father, Joe Kennedy, strike very true.
Let's talk about the summer of 1955.
I think that was one of the worst periods of the marriage. I think if it hadn't been for his father saying, "You've got to do it," I think probably his dream would have been to settle down by a lake in Sweden with a beautiful blonde.
I loved him, and he loved me, but that was nothing to do. He had another destiny, and so had I.
Gunilla says JFK tried to keep the love affair going. She says he offered to set her up with an apartment at New York's Carlisle Hotel and a job.
He called me, and he called my mother, and he said, I really can't live without Gunilla. I want her to be a model in New York. And I got the message that he could not make any change in his marriage and come there as some kind of, I don't know what. But
a mistress.
Yeah, yes, okay. We say mistress, so it was no.
Gunilla got on with her life. She married a wealthy Swedish landowner, and Kennedy sent best wishes. 3 years later, she saw him for the last time. Gunilla, her husband Anders, and sister Eva were in New York in 1958. A friend invited them to a charity bowl at the Waldorf Astoria, where Senator Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline were on the dais. From her table, Gunilla scribbled a message on a napkin.
As you know, he called me gorilla sometimes. I wrote
Gorilla.
Swedish gorilla sitting in front of you. And I said, Maître D, please, will you give this to Senator Kennedy? And it was 1 second after. He stood up, waving.
She says Kennedy signaled her to meet him in a corridor away from the crowded ballroom.
He just gave me a huge hug. And then it's wonderful to say, yeah, I love you. You know, it's love, still like that.
When an enterprising photographer snapped their picture, she says Kennedy grabbed the camera and smashed it.
Does it diminish your sense of what you had with him to learn, as we have in the past years, of all the many women that were part of his life?
Not at all. Not at all. I think my story with him was so special, so I really doesn't diminish at all. I can assure you that. Has nothing to do with the rest. Nothing.
How is it possible that this was kept a secret for more than 40 years?
He, in a sense, put his fate in the hands of all these women he pursued. Any of them could have told the story and made big bucks from doing so. The fact that none of them did in his lifetime is a remarkable indication of how deeply the women felt for him.
I borrowed him for a week, a beautiful week, that no one can take away from that.
Today, Gunilla von Post, who was first widowed, then divorced, divides her time between the U.S. and Europe, spending time with her children and grandchildren. An avid photographer, she's filled many albums with records of her travels and adventures, except, of course, for that week 42 years ago when she borrowed Jack Kennedy.
So you have no photographs of the two of you?
No, unfortunately not. But I have all the letters and telegrams and the memory in my heart and the love in my heart. And I think that is not so bad.
Lynn, this is not the first woman you and I know of who supposedly John Kennedy said he divorced his wife and married. Judith Exner, whom you interviewed, says the same thing.
Right.
Yet they all have this feeling about him. Nobody's angry.
Not only are they not angry, not one of them has complained. And remember, Barbara, these women have kept the secret. This woman kept the secret for 42 years.
But she is trying to make money now. She's written a book.
Well, she says she is doing it for a different reason. She says she's doing it because she wants the world to know this was a very special man. She had a very special relationship. And even when, you saw when I said to her, but this was adultery, she said, yeah, but don't think of him that way. Think of him as a sensitive, tender, loving man. That's what he was.
Boy, he sure must have been charming to have these women feel about him that way until today. So interesting.
Some guy.
And the story will go on. Thank you, Lynn.